Yeah, I am definitely blending in with the background here. Now, on my TikTok video about the recent Fed rate increase, Joe Gattone, I hope I'm saying that right. He's a realtor in the Chicagoland, Illinois area. And by the way, if you are on TikTok, I would give him a follow. He puts out some really good content. He made a great comment on that video, which was a question how the Fed rate is not directly tied to mortgage rates. So let's take a quick look at that and see what we can come up with. So the Federal Reserve is one of many influences on the mortgage rates, along with inflation and economic growth. The Federal Reserve doesn't set mortgage rates, as a lot of people tend to think, but it does affect mortgage rates indirectly, however. Mortgage rates are actually determined by many elements, including the inflation rate, the pace of job creation, and whether the economy is growing or shrinking. The Federal Reserve's monetary policy is a factor too, and is set by the Federal Open Market Committee, or commonly referred to as the FOMC. So now you might be wondering, what does the Federal Reserve actually do? So the Federal Reserve is the nation's central bank. It guides the economy with twin goals of encouraging job growth while keeping inflation under control, which we know is currently a problem. Now, the FOMC pursues those goals through monetary policy by managing the supply of money and the cost of credit. Its main monetary policy tool is the federal funds rate, which you've been hearing has been increasing, and that interest rate is the one that banks use to charge one another for short-term loans. Now, although there's no such thing as a federal mortgage rate, the federal funds rate influences interest rates for longer-term loans, which would then include mortgages. The FOMC meets 8 times a year, roughly every 6 weeks, to tweak their monetary policy. And so we just had that last week when they increased rates. At the conclusion of each of these meetings, the committee then releases a statement explaining its reasoning. 3 weeks later, the meeting's minutes are then released, serving these Fed nerds such as myself even more detail to look into. Now, do mortgage rates follow the Fed rates? The Fed and the mortgage market move like a dance partner. So sometimes the Fed leads, sometimes the mortgage market leads, and sometimes they dance on their own. The federal funds rate and the mortgage rates usually move in the same direction, but it's hard to say whether the mortgage rates follow the Fed's actions or the other way around. Now, the FOMC prefers to give investors a heads up whenever it plans to raise or cut short-term rates, and members of the committee advertise their intentions by sprinkling hints into the public speeches when they're being interviewed and whatnot, so that way the message can kind of get out before it becomes official. Kind of creates what they've been terming as a soft landing in a different sense. So by the time the committee then meets officially, there's usually a consensus among investors as to whether the Fed will cut rates, raise them, or keep them unchanged. As that consensus then solidifies before the FOMC meeting, mortgage rates usually drift in the direction that the Fed is expecting to move. So in other words, they price it in ahead of time. So often by the time the meeting happens, mortgage rates have already reflected that change. So no real change actually occurs as a result, a direct result of the increases. At the same time, mortgage rates move up and down daily in reaction to the ebb and flows of the U.S. economy and global economies, which are the same developments that the Fed actually responds to itself. So occasionally the Fed mortgage rates move in opposite directions. Now, the Federal Reserve raised the target federal funds rate by 0.75 of a percentage point on July 27, 2022, which was that last video I made, to a range from 2.25 to 2.5%. More increases are expected throughout 2022, according to the committee's projections, and mortgage rates sometimes rise in anticipation of that federal rate increase, and that's what happened in the first half of the year in 2022 here when things really took off in January. Now, although there's merely an indirect link between mortgage rates and the federal funds rate, the Fed does have a direct influence on the rates charged on home equity lines of credit, or HELOCs as we know them, which typically have an adjustable rate. So interest rates on HELOCs are linked to the Wall Street Journal prime rate, which is the base rate on corporate loans by the largest banks. The prime rate in turn then moves with the federal funds rate. So the prime rate rose to 4.75% after the June 15th, 2022 Fed meeting. On a HELOC with an interest rate of 5%, the monthly interest on a $50,000 balance would be roughly $208.33. Now, the federal rate increase of 0.75% would raise the HELOC rate to 5.75%, and the interest-only monthly payment would then increase $31.25 to $239.58. So obviously you can see how that directly impacts those HELOCs. Hopefully this adds a little bit more information on how there's only an indirect link between mortgage rates and the federal funds rate. So next time you hear that the Fed is going to increase rates, know it's probably already priced in or hasn't directly affected mortgage rates at all.